Our online stock is upstairs.
I see.
Yeah. So we keep our online stock separate from our store stock. Because
Okay.
it's,
Well, you don't want...
logistically, it just works out because otherwise, with a shop this size, things get wandering off in different sections, and then you can't complete an order, and then you lose your ratings. And,
Yeah.
I find that ratings are important.
Okay, so Marvin Post is the proprietor of Attic Books in London, Ontario, Canada. One of the largest secondhand bookstores in Canada. Welcome to the Bibliophile.
Thank you.
Why are you one of the largest bookstores in Canada?
I have a lot of trouble saying no when it comes to buying.
I noticed that. I've just dumped a whole bunch of books on you. Thank you.
Yeah, I like buying large quantities. I like buying. That's the fun part of the business, and
Is what? Seeing what's coming in the door?
it's the adventure in terms of what comes into the door.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So, and then I buy sort of related material, a lot of ephemera, which is interesting in a lot of different ways.
Like what ways?
Well, it's like photographs. Like I bought some photographs yesterday of Corfu, and it's hand-colored photographs of people in costume, native costume, around 1890.
Like Greek native?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's, like that's fun.
Yeah.
And, like doing the research is quite interesting.
So yeah, well, buying is typically pretty fun.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The selling is
Well,
the tough part, I guess.
It is. Well, you know that. you have trouble selling some of the books that you've bought because you become somewhat emotionally attached to it.
Yeah, it's wrenching.
It is.
But space requirements, that's one thing, I guess. The other thing is over time you just sort of get interested in different subject areas, and you want to shift that.
And space is always a problem.
Yeah.
Even with 17,000 square feet, I have space problems.
Uh-huh.
Not in the retail part, because I insist on not having it cluttered and piled up, and I just find that shopping experience is not something that I like.
You like it to be clean and organized?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to know where it is when you're looking for something?
Yeah, and I'm totally disorganized. I have multiple desks with heaps and piles, and I spend a lot of time looking for stuff that I've misplaced, but the store can't be that way.
Okay, so we talked about buying, the fact that you buy a lot of stuff,
Yes.
and the store is well organized.
That's the staff.
That's the staff doing it.
That's the staff. Like,
Yeah.
I know what my limitations are. My staff is the group that looks after keeping things organized and on track.
Okay. Well, why else are you successful?
I buy. If you don't buy, you're not successful. A lot of people, when they call me up, they've had another dealer in, and the other dealer wants 3 books.
Out of 150.
Out of 150 or 2,000 books.
Right.
And they know that they can sell those 3 books within a reasonable length of time, or they've had them. And the problem with that is, one, there's no adventure left for the dealer. The other is that there are no, like there are sometimes quite nice surprises, like a book that you didn't think was worth a great deal. All of a sudden you do your research and you find, yes, it is quite a good book, and I didn't recognize it as such.
Yeah.
So I buy in all categories. If you're a specialist in, the Bloomsbury group, then you should know everything there is to know about the Bloomsbury group, and which books are important and which books, are fairly common. So I tend to buy in every subject matter. Some subjects are easier to sell than others. I find that religious books are a little tough to sell these days, but then you look at the number of religious bookshops that have closed, And of all of the independent bookshop categories, I'd say that subcategory has probably been hit harder than anyone. But they were also starting to get into a lot of the related kitsch, the crucifixes,
Statues and
like the BVMs, Blessed Virgin Mary, that sort of thing. So they were getting a lot more into the regalia of the religion, and that's just not where the market's been going.
So what does sell then?
A lot less than what used to.
Why is that?
I think that there's just so many more books available, and people are downsizing. Like our generation, people who still have parents around or have recently passed away know that when they downsize, it makes you reflect on your own situation, and you're going, I need to downsize because I don't want to be doing this to my kids. And I hear that so often these days. So you have a double cohort of people downsizing. Some of them it's because of estates or moving into a nursing home, and then the next generation because they're going, we don't want to do this to our kids. And kids these days, people in their 20s and 30s, they're minimalists. They're either living in an apartment and they don't have much space, or they live in one of these big homes which have very little usable space. It's amazing how little usable space some of them have. And everything's on credit, The house has got a mortgage, the 2 cars in the laneway both have loans, the furniture's on loans.
So books are way down the priority list.
Right. Like you buy that with a credit card, which is another form of debt that a lot of them have. So a lot of them have rather substantial debt, including, the debt for their education, which, our generation did not go through that kind of debt load.
No. So that's explaining in part why they don't sell. Books
Right.
don't sell. But you're doing really well, so...
I'm doing well because I keep things moving. So if a book has been on the shelf for more than a year, it gets half price put into the basement. So I have fresh stock that's on the shelves. It's a large store, but it still has a lot of fresh stock. It looks different than the last time you came in.
So if I come in 3 weeks from now, it'll look different?
A little different. If you came in 3 months from now, a lot more. And, some people come by once a year. And if they go into a shop and they see pretty much the same shelf of books of their subject interest, they're not going to come next year. They're going to say, well, I could come in 3 or 4 years. And once that thought comes into play, then they generally never show up again. Unless they're doing a nostalgia trip, which I guess happens, but not often enough to make it viable for business.
Okay, so it's turnover that's doing it
turnover,
for you.
And you have to make a lot of mistakes to do turnover. People are so afraid of making mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, as my first wife would gladly attest to.
Not your second wife, though.
Well, I'm still married to the first one, but I live with my girlfriend. So
Okay.
everyone's a lot happier.
Very good. Yeah, in fact, I like it when you make mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, the pricing mistake, I don't want you to buy stuff and not be able to sell it.
Right.
But if you price it really low by mistake, I love that.
Right. And then my mistakes that I make in the other direction, well, that takes care of itself by the turnover, by pushing it through the basement and then the sale cards. And I'll go out and look at the sale card every once in a while, and it breaks my heart. I paid $20 for that book, and it's still sitting there at $1.
Yeah.
And no one's picked it up.
But that's rare, right?
That's unusual. But then you also go, well, wait a minute. I bought 50 books at the time, and 10% of them are out here in the cart, and hopefully I've sold more than half at full price, and close to another quarter of them I've sold at discounted price. So in the end, worrying about small mistakes is actually a bigger mistake
Yeah, you just want the turnover.
Right. Well, you have to have the turnover, but if you worry about making mistakes too much, then you freeze.
Yeah.
You know, do I cross the road? Do I not cross the road? Halfway through, you're going, well, should I cross or should I go back? That's basically when you get hit, is when you freeze.
Well, the other thing too, just as someone who brings my books into a bookseller, I came back here because you did a really good job the first time I came in. I brought a ton of books, and I was happy with what you gave me in trade.
Right.
So I brought another batch of books down, and I think they're pretty good books.
Yeah.
And I think they'll sell. They're good quality. That's we haven't done the math yet this time around, but I think it's about the fact that I'm getting a fair shake. That's why I came back. I felt, and I trust you.
Right. And the trade is always an attractive feature because I like the trade because it saves my cash flow. I don't need to make a profit, both buying and selling. I'm not a bank. Like if you took in $100 US to the bank and you cashed it in for Canadian, they take about 3% as their cut. And then later in the day, if you wanted the $100 back because all of a sudden you need the $100 US back, you go in, they charge you another 3%. So they make 6% on the difference, and they hate it when you point that out, that the spread is actually 6%. It's not 3%. They say it's 3%.
But another thing that I'm happy about is, and what I want to do business with you, is it precisely because of your turnover. I'm able to come and have a look at your online, at least, at your stock, and I do that probably every 3 months or so. And there's new stuff that's interesting to me there every time I look. And that's a function of what you're talking about.
Right. And I've viewed the online business as a totally separate business in some respects. Mm-hmm. It shares the same space, but I keep my online inventory separate. And the dynamics of online are quite different. So, well, like this Book of Negroes, for instance.
Yeah.
It's available online at a fairly low price. First edition in dust jacket. I have too many copies of it, and I wouldn't put it online because for me it's just not worth it. I sell between 5 and 10% of what I have online in a year.
5 to 10% of the stock you've got online is what you sell. That's
online.
All. Right.
So the dynamics of what's online is so different than what's in the store. So in the store I don't have to worry about shipping costs. I find that a $100 book here is a $100 book in the States, and it's £100 in Britain, and it's €100 in France. So it's the number is the same, but it doesn't really translate into the exchange rates unless you're talking serious books, like $100,000 book, then it makes a difference.
Sorry, I'm missing this. Are you talking about in the store or online?
In the store, it's $100.
100 Canadian, whereas
Yeah.
it would be 100 US in the similar store in the States.
So my online stock, if it's $100, it's $100 US plus the shipping, which I like to keep the shipping price the same. So if it's a big heavy book, then I edge the price up a little bit, but I still want to be competitive. Mm-hmm. And if it's a big set and it's going to be too much for shipping, then I don't even bother putting it online. Then it's just store stock, and if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it moves on. But sets are really tough. I like having things that no one else has online, so it's got to be unusual. It's got to be price competitive, including the shipping, because the default on most of the sites now is lowest total price. So that includes the shipping. So somebody who has this book for $3 online but charges $50 for shipping, and there are a lot of dealers in the States who are now charging $50 US to ship to Canada because they don't want to ship to Canada.
What percentage of your business online contributes to the total?
It's about 10%. and it's edging up a little bit, but it's, like everyone points out, it's the fastest growing segment. But it's still a small segment, you know.
So it's really people coming into your store and buying directly.
That's the main business.
And that's 90% of your business.
Well, I also sell at 2 antique malls, and that's a different business again.
Mm-hmm.
And I also sell at shows. And each show is quite different. And it was really brought home to me when I was on the second floor in London years ago, and I moved to the ground floor, and what sold changed sometimes quite dramatically within certain categories, because all of a sudden I had clients for that.
Just coming off the street.
Just coming off the street. So you can move down one floor, and who shows up is different than when you were on the second floor. Every time you move up a step, you lose business. I found that out the hard way. My first store was on the third floor with no elevator, so it was pretty slow in terms of business. But I learned a lot.
You've been in the business for 40 years?
42 years. Yeah.
Still like it?
I still love it. I love it. You know. But it's a totally different business. That's the steam heat.
That's the what?
Steam heat. The clanking.
That's not someone doing that? That's a machine that's doing that?
The steam is piped along in pipes and goes through my reds, and then, so I don't have a furnace or a boiler or anything like that on premises.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you own this. That's another key to your success, I think we suggested.
It is. I own the building. So in 5 years, the rent usually goes up. I had a landlord that didn't bother fixing the roof years ago, and wouldn't do anything for maintaining the building. And so those costs are on you anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Like if the landlord fixed the roof, he'd be charging me that much more in rent. So you're going to make a mortgage. You're going to make payments on a mortgage, whether it's yours or someone else's. That's up to you. So commercial real estate can be a little tough to get into at the beginning, but if you time it, which I did with this place.
Yeah, didn't the mayor kind of suggest or invite you to come and check this place out?
The mayor was after me to come back downtown because downtown was pretty rough in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Is that the elevator, by the way?
That's the elevator.
Okay.
Yes.
It
sounds like...
We get everything on this. This will pick everything up. Yeah. But it gives us a chance to say that you bought a building with an elevator, which is bonus.
Right. Yeah. So when I looked, I had lots of choice. The prices were really good.
Yeah. When was that?
96.
Okay.
So
you just have to sort of, as you say, time your purchase.
Time the purchase, you buy it on a dip.
Mm-hmm.
When I bought the building, it was a leap of faith.
But you had a lot of sort of, with the mayor, you had a lot of people who wanted you to do well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like 2 months after I opened, they closed the street off for road construction, which was...
They're doing that again, too, aren't they?
They're doing that again next year. So,
yeah.
But next year, it's actually going to be much more intensive than it was 22 years ago.
What shows do you participate in?
I used to do a number of antique shows, but I've stopped doing them. They're worse than the book shows in terms of declining business. So I do the Toronto Antiquarian Book Fair. I do the Toronto Old Paper Show. I do postcard shows.
These are that's ephemera.
That's ephemera.
Yeah.
I do an old camera show, and I show up with photographs and books and some cameras.
Anything else? Do you do anything in the States or no?
I don't do any in the States. It's just too much of a challenge in terms of border crossings.
Yes, how does that work? Do they what do? They just say, do they try and charge you tax or duty or something when you go across?
Well, if you make the mistake and say that you're working over there doing a book fair, then immigration gets involved, and they'll send you back. So, you have to be careful about how you say things at the border. You can't lie, and you certainly can't get caught out a lie, because if you get caught out a lie, then things are pretty rough, and they'll send you back or arrest you. The U.S. border guys, they pack big sidearms, so they're a little intimidating. When you come into Canada, they don't pack sidearms, but they kill you with paperwork.
That's typically Canadian, I guess, it, compared to the States. Yeah. What about you yourself? You talked to me just earlier about rhinoceroses that you're kind of interested in.
Yeah, I like rhinos.
You collect rhinos, or?
Yeah, I've got a small collection.
Of what, prints?
A few prints, a few like animals, like the footstool in our living room at home is a rhino. So it's just, it's, I don't know, for some reason I relate to them. They're a nice, peaceful animal.
Sure are.
Except for when you get them mad, and then they just lower their head and charge.
They got thick skin.
And they've got a thick skin.
What's the favorite part of the business? I think we touched on it, but what's your favorite part of this business?
I think a lot of it's the people. Meeting the interesting people.
Collectors, you mean, or?
Collectors, people selling, people why they sell, and like it's the interaction with people, and someone finding the book that they've been looking for 50 years and finding it, and not saying, well, it's $20 and I don't want to spend $20 on it. Like that can be a little frustrating sometimes. I've looked for this book for all of my life, and I don't want to pay that kind of money. Well, it's a scarce book, so.
But it's the idea of helping people to in their passionate search for things, I guess.
Right, and it's letting people find things that they didn't know existed.
So being of service in a way.
Yeah. My favorite is to do house calls. A lot of antique dealers and book dealers don't like doing house calls, aren't comfortable doing them, whatever.
Yeah.
I like doing them. You find out why people are selling them. This is part of. It's been handed down in the family, and it just collects dust at this point, or sometimes it's I need to sell them to put bread on the table.
Yeah.
And
so very human stories.
It's very human stories.
And what's the least favorite part?
The least favorite part is the HR department, the hiring and firing.
Okay.
And occasionally it's the firing. I like the employees I have right now, and
how many do you have altogether?
I've got 8 right now.
Okay.
A year ago, I think I had 12.
Again, is that a sign of the amount that you're selling, or just the fact that these are more efficient, these people, or?
I had projects that needed doing. So when I bought the building 22 years ago, I also bought, a year later, 17 van loads of books printed before 1800. And a van load generally is between a ton and 2 ton.
So you do buy?
I do buy. And I was still dealing with some of that stuff, and it was still, there to be priced. So I've now pretty much finished with all of the stuff that I bought from, it was an institutional purchase.
Sure.
So, and I have lots of backlog of stuff I haven't priced and...
You've got a ton of stuff in storage, right?
I have, right now I've got 2 storage units. I just finished emptying 1 storage unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is kind of a fuzzy question, but I'm interested in good areas to collect in. And now, of course, the first response to that is you collect what you love. But are there any areas that you see that would be really neat and fun to collect in that it's a reasonable price to go after these things?
Well, a lot of it's reasonably priced now. If you collect, you should collect in something you love, of course. But if you love what you do in terms of a career, then you have an advantage. So if you're a geologist and you collect books on geology or a related field. So exploration, for instance, is quite often something that geologists collect.
I know space exploration is very popular too, eh?
Right. So, but if you're like a computer geek, early books on computers are now starting to get very, very strong prices, and have been for the last 15 or 20 years. But I think that there's still a long ways to go with some of that. And it's a field where there is some serious money in terms of the collectors.
Yeah, because it's high-tech people, right?
Right. So if you like car books, okay, so unless you're Jay Leno, and you don't worry too much about finances, car books are quite a reasonable area to collect in. I just bought a collection last year of someone who collected books where it involved traveling by car. So they were travel books from 1900 to 1930, and the theme was where the people would drive in a car.
I just noticed your shirt with the skulls on it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Little skulls.
Little skulls, they're very subtle.
Yeah. You're saying about the traveling by car, and what's so neat, of course, is that the car just came in what, like around 1900 or
Right.
or
Yeah,
late
so-
1800s.
So, they talk about, like changing the tire rather frequently. I mean, now we have CAA.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that used to be quite a, you wouldn't go 50 miles in a car and not have to change a tire
Right.
in the early days. That whole aspect of it has changed a lot.
Mm-hmm. What about an area that used to be expensive but it's not expensive anymore?
Medical books. A lot of medical books are now a lot less money than they were 25 years ago. So doctors have lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them were interested in the history of medicine. A lot of those collections are now coming up. And it's the key books that are still going up in value. It's a lot like stamps, which is what I got into before books. So when I got into stamps, they used to say, well, stamps have never gone down in value. But you could see the bottom end of the market was starting to soften up. Now the mid-range and even the lower high-end stuff is not selling for what it used to. Stamps.
Right.
But the very top-end things, so they're usually guys, and the ones that are left are in their 80s and 90s. They've got the money, and it's been on their bucket list for their whole life to buy the 12-penny black Canadian. So the price on it just keeps going up.
Because the demand is still there, right?
The demand is really strong. The people have the money. They've wanted to buy it their whole life. And their kids at that point are in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And they're doing fine, so you don't have to worry about, looking after the kids. And you've wanted it your whole life. And, one shows up at an auction, you're going to go after it. And you're going to go after it hard.
So the same thing's happening with medical books, you're saying?
With medical books, yeah.
That's like illustrated medical books, or?
Illustrated medical books are still a lot stronger than like biographies of Osler, for instance. And I still deal in medical books. I've dealt in medical books fairly early on because no one else seemed to be doing much of that other than, Robert Campbell came into doing medical books.
He's in Montreal, right?
In Montreal, and now he's not as active as he once was because of health issues. He no longer has a store.
Mm-hmm.
So when you no longer have a store, you still have your client base, but you can't sell your client the second copy of a standard book.
Mm-hmm.
And because there are a lot of the new doctors aren't collecting yet. They're still dealing with rather substantial debt. It tends to be a demographic thing. So if you look at things that your cohorts are collecting, if you're young, you buy the best and figure on selling it to them when you're in your 60s and 70s, because that's when will want the key things in graphic novels, for instance.
This is a bit of a long-term proposition, isn't it?
If you're collecting to invest, that's what you need to do. And if you are even more mercenary, you would start collecting the things that your kids collect if you're in your 30s. So, people start developing their own interests when they're in their teens and 20s. So collecting comic books, for instance, that whole market developed starting in the 50s and is really coming up now with some incredibly high prices. And then it's the condition. So condition. Like the first Batman, gets phenomenal money at auction. The difference in price between one with like a slightly faded cover or a slightly rolled spine and one that's pristine, it's a factor of 10.
Well, does that same thing hold true for books?
It does to some extent, but sometimes people want things just for the content. And that's the thing that a lot of dealers who sell only to collectors miss, is that there are two separate distinct groups, and there's an overlap. So you have people who want to read a good book, and then you have the people who collect the first editions. And sometimes you can get the reader to start collecting the first editions.
If they love the book that much,
yeah. And some of the collectors will never read their books.
Yeah, I'm guilty.
They'll buy a reading copy of a book because, and then sometimes when they start to read it, they go, "Well, I don't understand what the fuss is about this," and then they'll dump that collection. The worst thing you can do is collect to your parents' generation. So authors that are really collectible in your parents' time.
Yeah, but what happens if you love them, like I love Huxley?
Well, that's different. You love Huxley, and Huxley is still well thought of.
Yeah, they have to hold their reputation, I guess.
They have to hold their reputation.
Yeah.
But
Theodora Welty? Oh, yeah.
Faulkner.
Right.
Anyone who's tried to read Faulkner gives up.
Yeah. Well, except for the academics.
Well, except for the academics, like Faulkner has written a great sentence. Like some of his novels are one sentence long. And okay, so that was pretty new and startling at the time.
So you're saying he's nowhere near as popular as he was? Or he's got still got a good reputation.
Still got a good reputation. But he's one of the great unreadables.
Yeah.
Ulysses, on the other hand, is still an important book. It's still a difficult read.
But it rewards reading.
It rewards reading, whereas Faulkner, not so much.
I would agree with that. But that's taste as much as anything.
Part of it's taste, but part of it is the hook. So Ulysses was a 24-hour period of someone who went to a lot of bars.
Yeah. In between masturbating, then he went to the bar.
Like there's a lot of vices involved. So Faulkner doesn't deal with vices so much. And, so it's a lot less human.
But again, you're saying the price of his books has gone down over the years?
It's a lot softer than it was. The people who collected him are now selling.
Yes, and so they're glut in the market.
Supply and demand.
I see.
A lot of books that were sold as being hard to get 30 years ago, well, now online you go, there's 80 copies available.
Yeah, it's not rare.
It's not rare at all. But it can also mislead you in the other direction, in that it's not rare right now because the demographic that's selling, it's a group of people who are all downsizing or going to nursing homes or.
So in other words, it's a good time to buy Faulkner. if you think that his work is
exactly
valuable and good. Yeah. Okay.
But you don't want to buy ones that are less than pristine. So you want to buy the nicest copy available. Collecting and investing are...
They are tied. There's a
tie, but they're different.
They are different, but they're for me anyway. If I'm going to put money into a collection, I want to think that I'm going to get my money back at least.
Right. So buying the best you possibly can from an investment strategy is probably the best. It's the genres that get hit hardest. So the mysteries were really big 20 years ago. So now it's not so much. But within that, there are certain authors that are still very collectible.
Like who? Stephen King?
Stephen King. Now, Lee Child is a great read. Will he be a great read in 30 years? Probably not.
Just because he'll be dated and...
it dates.
Yeah.
Although if certain... It's really hard to know, though, in terms of which ones will date.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a crapshoot, but that's why you've got to go with what you love.
Right.
Then you don't regret.
And it's like investing in anything else. Like you're going to score big on 10% of what you buy. 25 to 40% is going to be a complete bust. And then there's the stuff that you'll do okay on. But you hope that the ones that you do really well on
compensate for the rest.
Compensate for all of the rest.
So you've seen and priced a ton of books. How many books do you think you've seen and priced in your life?
Well, I probably have 150 to 200,000 books in the inventory, and I turn it over. So I've seen millions and millions of books.
Yeah.
Now, I was talking to Stephen Fowler on Monday when he was buying books for his Bibliomat machine.
Ah, yes.
Because he's got, it's a challenge finding enough stock for it. So
this is at the Monkey's Paw?
That's the Monkey's Paw. And he started off working for a number of different booksellers in San Francisco. So he has a different take on how the business is run. One, he's much more American, and I've been called fairly American for Canadian booksellers because
But you mean you stalk American
writers?
writers?
I'm more aggressive in terms of...
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's good. That's why you're successful.
Well, fairly successful. I'm not incredibly rich, but I enjoy my life.
Exactly.
And I find that's more important than having lots of dollars. Because 5 minutes after I'm dead, I'm as rich as Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
5 minutes after
he's
dead.
You're equal, yeah.
Yeah. It's how you live your life. So in that regards, I'm incredibly rich. And it's not all about the money. But Stephen Fowler was saying that he worked for a guy who had a contract with the Goodwills. The stuff that they didn't put in their store, they would put in dumpsters. And they would go through the dumpsters, and the stuff that they didn't want went back into dumpsters. But they would root through piles and piles of books. It's pretty hard on the books that way. Now the standard is a Gaylord, which is a 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot cardboard box with a skid on the bottom.
Yeah, I don't understand.
That's how places like Goodwill move books. They put them into these
boxes,
and they get distributed sometimes to paper wholesalers and sometimes to people who go through them and try and find the treasures.
I see. Okay.
And then the stuff that gets cycled through their store, and that's why you don't find antiquarian books very often.
You don't. No, it's you do. Well, you do. You know,
on occasion,
and that's why you go there. But
you can.
It's already been screened pretty severely then.
But you can find like nice first editions of good authors, and you can find some great stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the fact that you know what to pay for a book. although you've said you make mistakes, you know what to pay for a book,
Right.
and you know what to charge for a book.
Right.
So why don't we turn now to some of the books that I've brought in, and just maybe what we'll do is sort of listen in to your internal voice,
Okay.
your instinctive thought process when it comes to some of these books, and we can be as long or short on each of them as you like.
Okay. All right. So, Lonesome Dove was a really popular book, and got a really good second wind when the movie came out, because the movie was almost as good as the book.
When did the book come out?
In the late 70s, early 80s? 85. And the movie came out, I think, about 10 years later. And in terms of movie history, it's a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, you also look at the amount of stuff that's being cranked out,
Yeah.
both in terms of fiction and in terms of movies.
When the movie comes out, is that when the best time to sell your copy of that book, or not?
That is a really good time. So
Within like 6 months of it coming out.
correct. But like movies, sometimes it takes a while for them to catch on. You know?
Okay.
Like they don't come out of the gate hard and fast.
Right.
The
So
other,
you wait until obviously there's a lot of buzz about it, and maybe it's
Whenever
nominated
there's-
for Academy Award or.
yeah. So, and then that's sort of like another kick at it in terms of strengthening the market.
Okay. So what do you think about that book in terms of how much you could sell it for, how much you're willing to pay for it?
Okay, so I'd sell that book now for about $25,
A first edition.
first edition.
Seriously.
Seriously.
Because
I know-
I've seen it online for several, 3 or 4, 500.
Correct. Now, it would be worth a lot more if it was signed. So currently there are 78 first editions of Lonesome Dove available on ABE,
Okay.
and they start at $20.
Isn't that funny? I thought they were a lot more than that.
Signed, they're $300 to $1,900.
Big difference, eh?
Big difference, and part of that is going to be like the condition. So like this one's in nice condition.
Yeah.
It's not
Not fine.
super crisp, clean copy. It's been read once or twice.
So it's very good, would you say? Very good, very good?
Yeah, and the first one refers to the book, and the second, very good, refers to the dust jacket.
Yeah.
So, the Book of Negroes. Oh, and that would be a store item.
Yeah, not online.
I don't put anything under $35 online anymore, because it really doesn't. If that's your only business, then yeah, you have to do that. But it's really not economical. So the Book of Negroes is a first edition, and I'd say it's fine condition. But I've got a number of copies of it, and it wouldn't be for online. So I don't need any more copies of it for the store. Earlier you had commented about Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, which has the movie and the TV show, so like there's a fair amount of demand for it. So first edition of that goes for $75 to $100. This one was the second, and it will sell faster at $20 than a first would at $75, because people are interested in the topic.
Mm-hmm.
So when there's a lot of excitement about a book, then it's a lot easier to sell, and then that strengthens the price. 10 years ago, the Handmaid's Tale it was a tough sell. It's not a happy book.
No.
It's not a happy show or a movie either.
No, miserable.
Yeah, but it's trending, as they say now. So the $20 book will sell a lot quicker than the $75 or $100 first edition will.
What about signed? How much did that bump it up to?
Margaret Atwood signs a lot. If it was signed, it would go for about $40 for the second edition, about $125 to $150 for the first edition. But she does sign a lot. So
That's why she invented the long pen.
exactly, which
To save
has
her
gone
arm.
nowhere.
Went nowhere, no. Okay.
Yeah. Quite frankly, it isn't all that new an invention. There was something called an auto pen, which you learn when you do autographs. So an auto pen JFK, John F. Kennedy, had 7 of them going. And so you would sign once, and it would copy that signature exactly, or parts of it. So you could do John Fitzgerald Kennedy, J.F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. You could alter the machine to do different things. So he had 7 of them going. So an autograph by John F. Kennedy is likely to be suspect. So it needs to be written in the same pen to someone to make it that much more authentic. And authentic signatures are becoming much more important. There are a lot of fake signatures out there, especially in sports and entertainment. And it got so bad that California passed a law that if you sold something that was autographed and it was not a real signature, and on eBay, in sports and entertainment, they figure between 70 and 90% of it is fake.
Goodness, okay. So how do you determine that it's not fake?
Well, usually you can tell. You know, you look at authentic signatures and you look and you go, well, that's kind of dicey. And then with sports and entertainment, I just wash my hands of it. I don't do much of that. So, but if you sold a photograph that was signed by, say, Spielberg for $100 in California, or to someone in California, and they came back and said it's not authentic, you have to compensate them to the tune of 10 times of what you sold it for. And they were doing that for all autographs. This started about 2 years ago. So like the whole autograph market just collapsed because it's considerable risk. Then they got the law changed so that it was only for sports and entertainment, which is where the main problem is. Mm-hmm. But if you want to get, your sports hero and you go to one of these signings, they charge you like $50 or $100 for a signature on a photo.
You have to hand over the cash, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, they'll take credit cards.
Yeah, well, why not? Especially if you consider that probably 50, 80% of them are just going to resell it.
Correct. So the whole money aspect of the autograph market has changed dramatically. Now with books, it's a lot less common for fake autograph. I don't tend to worry about it too often. And then certain authors sign a lot. The Book of Negroes gets signed a lot.
That's why you're successful. You know these things. You don't get
right.
suckered into buying.
Alice Munro doesn't sign as much.
Okay.
And her signature now, like if it's a fairly current signature, like it changes over the years. And Alice won the Nobel. When a book wins a prize, that's another boost for the price. When the author dies, it's a short boost for the price. And then things start to revert to the norm. And some authors stay popular long after they're dead, like Andy Warhol continues to gather steam. But the art market, again, is...
That's crazy, yeah.
It's a very strange market. There's no rhyme or reason to a lot of why things are worth money.
Let's look at Out of Africa.
Okay.
Now, I was very happy when I bought that. I think I paid $25 for it or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I went online and I saw that it was worth, $300 or whatever it went for. It was so right. What's the story on it now?
Okay.
This one.
So when I was first in business, I used to come across these very regularly.
That was 40 years ago, though.
That was 40 years ago.
Okay.
And it was nothing special.
Yeah.
And then the movie bumped it up quite a bit. And then people started reading it, and I haven't read it, but it's supposed to be like a fairly good read, as opposed to some of them who are just very pedantic or obscure beyond belief or just boring.
Yeah.
And quite often they can be all of them.
That's the worst thing you can call a book, is boring.
Yes. So, and then now it comes down to condition. So, like, the dust jacket is quite nice on it. It's a little frayed at the top and the bottom of the spine. That's pretty normal. There's some yellowing on the thing. Cover has a few spots.
It's a nice looking flamingo on the cover.
And it's got a nice looking flamingo on the
Right on the, yeah.
on the book cover.
Yeah.
So I think of it more as like it's going to sell more along the lines of about $100 to $150.
And what's your policy about what you would pay for that? Do you have do you want to make that public?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So I usually pay about a quarter of what I would try and sell it for. So that covers, the difference covers the overhead.
Yeah. The fact that you're going to have it sitting in your inventory for
And,
however long.
you know, like all of a sudden the market gets flooded with a lot of them. You know, like there's all these chances that you take when you buy something like that. So
Yeah.
in terms of risk and reward, that's what I look at.
Yeah.
Now, if it's something that I know that I can sell much more quickly, I'm much more willing to pay percentage-wise more.
Like what, for example, out of this group here, if there's anything?
There probably isn't. Well, okay, yes, Walt Whitman, Specimen Days. It's a bit of an unusual title. It's a first Scottish edition, which is a bit of a minus. People would prefer the first American edition. So this is going to be probably about a $200 book.
Easy to sell? I guess you won't know. You don't know.
It's going to be a lot easier to sell than something where I already have a copy of it, because it goes to the back of the line. So any additional copies you buy go to the back of the line, so it's going to take longer to sell it. So I'd be probably more inclined to pay closer to 40% of something like this. Something that I know I have a customer for, and, you know, like it's not a $10 book.
What about Huxley? We talked about Huxley.
Huxley's going to be a bit of a slow sell.
What about anything here that's going to be a fast sell?
Nothing particularly. Like I bought a copy of Alice Munro, Who Do You Think You Are, yesterday, and I paid, possibly I overpaid on it because the binding on it is horrible.
Notoriously horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, the glue gives way, and so it needs to be re-glued, and I will get that done. But it was signed.
Right.
And it's a contemporary signature.
Contemporary meaning at the time that the book was published. Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So it's probably going to cost me $50 to get it fixed up, and I paid $25 for it.
And how much are you going to sell it for?
Probably $200.
What about this early edition of American edition of Portrait of the Artist as Young Man by Joyce?
So that's a third printing.
Yeah.
I'd probably retail that for about $30 or $40, maybe a bit more. Is that your pricing there?
I just put that in there because that's what I saw online. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's going to be one where I've made a mistake in the wrong way. And then, like, if it's substantial, then what I do is I send a check to whoever for the difference. Or if they're doing trade, then I say, I've added some money to your trade.
Okay. That's very decent.
And it's just good business.
Yeah. Well, it's just the trust factor stays in place.
It stays in place, right? So now, it still wouldn't have sold a lot of copies because it was before Ulysses.
Same with the Dubliners.
Yeah. And so it's early in the career.
So there probably weren't that many in each printing, right?
The print run would have been probably 500.
I think that might have been, that's the third printing, but it might have been in the same year that the first one was done.
No,
maybe not.
1916, 17, and then 18.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But it was January of 18. So,
yeah.
And December of 16. So, you know, within a little over a year, it went through 3 printings. So even then, it speaks to his reputation as a writer.
Coming up, rising, yeah.
You know, so I tend to find that online pricing is...
It just gets people's expectations up when they see it, doesn't it? And that just makes it more difficult for you when they come in expecting to get more than you say it's worth.
Yeah, and sometimes the price online is just a complete crock in the other direction. and it's getting harder and harder to look up stuff online because they have all of the PODs,
Yeah,
print on demand.
Yeah.
You know, it's the clutter. You know, and then you look at the dealer. So if it's some guy without any reputation, so you know, like he's in
ABAA,
some
that's what I'm thinking of.
very small town,
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere, obviously doesn't handle this sort of stuff.
But someone who belongs to the ABAA, you would automatically expect that they know what they're doing, right?
More so, a lot more so.
Yeah.
So, you know, like being a member of an association is a plus. And then your star ratings. I mean, I hate to say it, but the star ratings are important. Like,
I mean, in terms of reliability or
like AB
good service.
has a 5-star rating. So if you're a 2-star, it means that your order completion rate is probably somewhere around 80%, and you're likely to get warned. And if you persist, then you get kicked off of ABE, so you can no longer sell online.
Right.
So if your star rating is low, if you're, you know, like if the lowest price is somebody who's not very reliable, then you can pretty much dismiss that. And then if it's someone who's got a very high rent location in New York City at the high end, because they've got a lot more overhead, I would hazard that, you know, like some of the big places are paying
Big, like Bauman's.
Bauman's is paying close to $100,000 a month in rent.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know, for their New York location. I think the Philadelphia location and their Vegas location is a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, if you want to sell books to the Wall Street types, then that's what you've got to do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
got to be there, yeah.
Yeah. You don't have that kind of location, then you're not going to get that kind of price.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at another book here. I want to know if that's a first edition or not. It's got a number line, but it just looks kind of weird.
So I still like Ahern.
Yeah.
For the points.
Yeah, I've interviewed them.
You know, like they know their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have it in here. They just have his first book, which is Black Sunday.
Okay.
But a lot of the books, the first editions that they list in here, the prices have softened.
Yeah, that's the Alan and Patricia Ahern collected books. You're saying that gives you a guide, but the prices are not as good as they were in that book.
They were always strong in terms of their pricing.
Right. Strong meaning what?
High.
High. Okay.
Yeah. So that would have been for a beautiful copy.
Yeah.
In pristine condition, not autographed, but it would have been in a superb condition with, you know, someone who wasn't in a shop that was kind of low rent. Their shop was certainly not low rent either. I do think that's a first edition.
Yeah, there is the number line, and but it's funny, there was something about it I thought. But again, for you, that makes a difference, but not a huge difference, I guess, in terms of the price you'd charge?
Not a huge difference for a lot of them.
So what would you charge for that, The Silence of the Lambs?
First edition of that's probably $40 or $50 book.
And what about J.G. Ballard's The Empire of the Sun?
It wouldn't make any difference whether it's a first or not.
And what about...
Because my clientele...
In the store, where you do most of your sales.
Does not...
They don't care.
They don't care.
Right.
And it's not going to be worth enough to put it online. A lot of this stuff, you know, you've got like 40 or 50.
Yeah.
Now, I looked up the Cocktail Party.
Yeah.
Okay. So the spine's faded on it,
It is.
which is pretty typical of it. So when I first went online, I do Dust Jacket, first edition, and 81 show up.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
So, but then a lot of them are dealers who will say first edition, second impression, which isn't a first edition at all. So you eliminate most of them because at that point it starts off at $6.50 in Dust Jacket. So the first edition, the first date with, and then this is where this came in, because it's got the points.
The collected books.
What you do is search within these results. It's here for her. It was
that was the point, and the point.
That's the
By
point.
point you mean is the specific, in that case, spelling of a word shows you whether or not it's a first edition.
So you put in that word in your search within the results. So then you know you're dealing with someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Isn't trying to palm off like a seventh impression as a first edition. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like some of them are thinking, they're thinking that it does matter, and they're ripping off people.
Yeah.
Because it isn't a first edition. It's a seventh edition or a second edition. It's not the first.
Yeah.
So the first state with dust jacket, there are 21 available, and it goes from $26 to $200, and then there's a couple that are there's one at $6,000, and that's James Cummins, and it's a presentation copy, and it's a special presentation copy, so it's a very special book. And if you got one in like that with the
spine,
the spine faded, so it's going to be towards the lower end of the $26 to $200. If I got one in that was, a spectacular presentation copy without a dust jacket, or with, a dust jacket that had faded like that, I would try and find the right dust jacket
to marry them.
Yeah. And you have to be upfront about when you do that.
Yeah.
But, you can leave this dust jacket on it and put a beautiful dust jacket on it. Like if it's worth doing, then you put it in a clamshell box.
So how much would you charge for this one then?
That one, I would probably put $30 on it.
And that's in the store?
That's in the store.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be worth putting online.
Okay.
And then, like some of the better books, I do put in the store first. I like having
good stuff
in.
To basically reward your regular patrons,
but
right?
you don't want to have it there for 4 years. Whereas online, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
So the turnover online is so much worse.
You mean slower?
Very much slower.
Yeah.
Like the turn rate is for some of these dealers, it's got to be 40 or 50 years before they would turn over their complete inventory. So you would sell this book 3 times and you would never sell this book type thing. So on average, you look at how often you turn over your inventory, and you can force it by moving stuff to the sales section. And it may be a $500 book, but if you don't have a customer for it, you can't eat the $500. You've got to do something. So you try and move it along by price. It used to be quite a bit more common for other dealers to come around and buy from dealers because they go, I've got a customer for that book. That doesn't happen very much anymore.
Why is that? Because they can find them online, or?
No, they can find it online. Well, the demographics for dealers is also getting a lot older.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. What about that George Bush, the Bush family book, the cookbook?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so he just passed away.
Yeah, I should mention it's signed by Barbara and George H.W. and the cook, chef.
The chef is a non-starter. Barbara Bush, it's nice, and it certainly helps date the signature because Barbara passed away a while ago. But George just passed away, so he's in the news. His street cred is right up there right now.
Top of mind.
Yes. So 2 weeks ago, I'd have said, this is going to be a $100 book. I could probably sell it easier for $200 now, and I'm willing to pay proportionately higher now if I can sell it, because I know I'd sell that before Christmas.
Yeah, it's a perfect gift, eh?
It is. Yeah, and I know someone who would buy that.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So.
So who's that? Someone who collects George Bush?
He's a political scientist.
Yeah. And collects
He collects
presidential?
He collects presidential stuff. He likes autographs. He likes some sort of a connection. You know, he's met Obama. He's met the Clintons. He's met a lot of these people. I think he's met Pierre Trudeau. I think he's met probably every prime minister since Trudeau.
Yeah.
And he loves his field.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
He'll be all over that.
That's great.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that's a big part of the what you're thinking is as well. It's who've I got? So how do you get a hold of all these interesting collectors? So they just hear about you, or how did you go after them? Or
that's the thing about having a store is that people come in. So he's someone who came in a number of years ago, and we've developed a relationship. And you can be a bit of a hard negotiator sometimes too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you have to sort of figure that in with, you know, especially if you're buying something for him. And he just, because he's moving, he tried to sell me some, you know, the presidential papers of Lyndon Johnson and stuff like that. And I said, you know, sorry, but, you know, my only market for that was you. And he goes, well, you know, that's fair. So it'll probably get moved to his new office.
Right.
Yeah, and he's moving a couple of 1,000 miles away.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
But doesn't mean you can't still do business with him, obviously.
No,
Yeah.
and you know, like he still has connections here in London. He will be coming to London.
Just a final question then. How do you go about getting, is it mostly people coming in the store and then you sort of develop a relationship? They ask questions and then you say, okay, I'll put your want lists together, or, you know, keep that in mind, or...
Yeah, it's people talking to people, and in terms of when people go to sell, then online becomes much more important, because they'll go online and they'll go, well, you know, like, who buys books? Well, I buy books.
You've got a reputation as...
You know, like, so...
Marvin the buyer.
Yeah, so, like, I advertise, so last year, in the last year, I've bought books up near Port Hope, Brampton, and Brampton was...
These are, do you do house calls?
House calls.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And, you know, like, they were substantial collections.
And you don't just buy 3 or 4 of their books and you know the ones
They want everything sold, so...
And you basically help them out that way.
Help them out.
Because so many dealers, as you said, don't do that. They serve themselves and not their clients.
Right, so they'll have had another dealer come in and say, these are the 3 books I can buy, and I can pay $400 for those books.
Yeah.
And I'll go in and I'll say, I can pay $600 for all of them, including those.
Yeah.
And occasionally, I can pay less for everything than the 3 books. And they'll say, you're willing to take everything?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it solves a problem. You have to look at it, you're solving a problem.
Yeah.
And I do house calls, and like yesterday I did one, and I ended up, the books were okay. They weren't great. The second house call I did was pretty much a write-off, but then I ended up buying some coins, and I bought some photographs, and I'm really happy with the photographs.
Yeah.
Because they're fun.
You've mentioned them about 3 or 4 times, obviously.
Yeah. You know, and the nice thing about photographs is that when you do a photography show, they're easy to move.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to say to, like, you would want to say to both the, I don't know if we don't call it an industry, the profession, or collectors out there, and or book lovers? Have you got things that you'd like to say to them?
Have fun with it. You know, it should not be something that makes you miserable. And have fun with it.
You mean?
Yeah. And, you know, the money is important, but it's not the most important thing.
What's the most important thing?
Is to enjoy your life. And if you know, dealing with someone's estate is a problem, okay, so most of the money is going to be in the house, the real estate. That's, you know, a lot of times people will pay someone to clear out the house, and there's great stuff.
Yeah.
I bought some stamps from a guy this summer, and he was paid to clear out the house, and I paid him $2,000 for the stamps.
And he was what?
He's one of these guys who charges to clear out a house, but the people wanted it dealt with. They didn't, like, for them it was worth paying him money to clear out the house. And don't store stuff. Like these storage units, like I'm regretting getting storage units because it's dead. You see the shows on TV with where they buy storage units, and you look at it and you go, well, that just paid for 3 months of storage, and that stuff looks like it's been there for like 8-10 years.
So what do you do with it then?
What do you do with it? I don't know. We deal with it. And, you can't look at getting the maximum amount of money in. You want to maximize the amount of money you net. And that's a different thing than getting the maximum amount of money, because you have to figure out what it costs for storage. Well, once you figure what it costs for storage on a lot of this stuff, I do a couple of antique malls, and sometimes the rent doesn't cover the cost of the booth. At that point, you're better off giving the stuff away.
Sometimes the amount you pay to have that booth is more expensive than what you sell during that month.
Yeah.
Right.
So at that point, you have to start thinking realistically and go, this is not productive. So, you're better off giving this stuff away.
Yeah, because you're not losing money.
You're not losing money.
Mm-hmm.
So like I go to the thrift shops and give them large quantities of stuff sometimes. Yeah, it's worth money, but it's not worth enough money to
pay the storage for it.
To pay the storage for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good message. Have fun.
Have fun.
Well, this was a lot of fun.
Good.
Thank you, Marvin.
All right. Thank you.
I've been speaking with Marvin Post, who is the proprietor of Attic Books in London, Ontario, Canada. Thanks again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
And if you have any further questions, as you can tell, I don't mind yakking.
Yeah, what's your website address?
Atticbooks.ca.
Okay. That's the easiest way to get a hold of you, I guess. But
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thanks again.
Or my staff.
Or your staff.
Yeah.
That's right. The organized people.
Yeah, the organized people.
Okay.